We have to talk about this talking point being used by some on the right and even some on the left about so-called outside protesters in the civil unrest that we're seeing across the country right now in dozens of urban areas. So I'm going to tell you what's being said. I'm going to tell you the truth. And then I'm going to tell you what the most important takeaway is from all of this, which is that it doesn't actually matter if protesters are coming from so-called the outside. So the right regularly talks about so-called outside protesters because their priority is to make it seem like there's not really a concern in our country about police brutality in the communities where the protests are happening. So when the right insists the protesters are coming from outside the city, from somewhere else, they can disqualify and ignore the activism that is actually motivating protesters. And they can say, these are provocateurs, these are looters and rioters, burglars, people who are there for nefarious reasons. But most importantly, what they want to argue by saying people are coming in from outside the cities is they want to argue that not that many people are actually concerned about police brutality, which was the catalyst for these protests. You've also got a little slice of the left where you've seen the outside protesters talking point used in the context of framing outsiders as the right-wing astroturf, whether it's white nationalists pretending to be Antifa, or in order to make Antifa and protesters kind of amorphous or look bad or whatever else. You're seeing less of it, but it's still also not the best thing, because here's the truth. Number one, in terms of those getting arrested, the reports that we've seen are that most of the arrests are people who live in the cities or metro areas where the protests are happening. So in Minnesota, there was a report about 20% of the arrests were outsiders. In Detroit, similar numbers, about 80% of the arrests were from the Detroit metro area. So first of all, it is factually untrue that a huge number, at least of the troublemakers, are from outside areas. But here are the two really important takeaways. First of all, it would make sense that the troublemakers, politics aside, are from the outside. Why? Well, there's that phrase about dogs don't go to the bathroom where they eat or something like that. Intuitively, of course, people are more likely to cause trouble and destroy stuff where they don't live. It says nothing about motive or justification for the protests whatsoever, but it makes sense that you're more likely to destroy a place that you don't actually live in. But here's the most important takeaway. Who cares if they're coming from the outside? You can still care about police brutality if you come into a city from somewhere else. Mass rallies happen in urban centers and population centers. Protests happen where there are people. If you live in northern rural Indiana, there aren't any sizable protests there because there's such little population density. It makes perfect sense that you would head into Chicago, for example, to be part of a larger protest. It doesn't mean you don't care about police brutality. It doesn't mean you're there to commit a crime or to attack people or to loot. It just means people are protesting where there are people. So I was reminded of this debate that happened around Barack Obama. Is he really a Christian or is he some kind of secret Muslim? And at some point, Colin Powell came out and said, the question of whether he is or is not Muslim is irrelevant. Muslims can still be president. It would change nothing about his policies if he were Muslim. And in the same way here, there is nothing invalid about protesters from out of town. Much of this country is very rural. The protests are limited to a few dozen large urban areas. Of course, you're going to have people from different places in cities protesting because that's where the protests are taking place. So we've got to take back this talking point. We can't allow the right or the left to miss the forest for the trees, just arguing about the protesters are from in or out of the city. The looters are from in or out of the city. People are going to cities because that's where the protests are happening, and there's nothing wrong with that.